Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as you know, we put Ghana first. Today, Bawku is boiling, and it does appear obvious that the whole country stands affected if steps are not taken to bring about a permanent resolution of the chieftaincy crisis in that part of the country. As we speak, it does appear that the latest development, the enskinment of a Bawku Naba rival, if he is taken to Bawku itself, there will be fire. How will this be stopped or avoided? The government issues a statement on the back of the development and denounces that chief or the process. It recognizes only the one known over the period as the rightful chief and overlord. The Mamproses are not happy about this. The government has directed the arrest and prosecution of those involved. Will that happen? How many days after the enskinment has the arrest happened, or have the arrest happened? And this Supreme Court case that is often repeated, recited to be the basis of the validity of the present chief. What exactly did the Supreme Court say? We'll examine that decision of the court. All the parties are here on Newsfile this morning. And the debt exchange program, controversial, but it's done and dusted, is it? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. And here is Samson's take. AG dummy misses it. Dimes lights. Godfrey Yeboah-Dame, the youngest occupant of the office of Attorney General and Minister for Justice, has, in the last 2 weeks, dimmed the lights on his shining performance. I have done only a couple of cases with him on the other side, before and in his present office. Many lawyers will confess he is simply good at what he does at his game, and feel proud that he is the man at the helm. But it's become difficult for many of us to associate his signature with those two letters, one conveying advice to the Auditor General and another defending the advice, deprecated as bizarre and unconstitutional interference in the exercise of the professional and independent mandates of the Auditor General. It is true, the Supreme Court has confirmed that the Auditor General or any independent constitutional body may assess the services of the Attorney General. However, the caution in Amegache versus Attorney General that such bodies like the judiciary and parliament should hire private lawyers of their choice where their position on an issue is in conflict with that of the Attorney General ought to be preferred any day. Justices Atuguba and Dateba affirmed that such bodies as SHRAJ, NCCE, and NMC sue and are sued in their own name and not through the Attorney General in order to avoid conflict of interest. The Auditor General audits the accounts of the Attorney General, Parliament, and bodies on whose boards some MPs sit or chair. Conflict of interest becomes inevitable if he must take advice or be represented by the Attorney General in certain cases, including the suit challenging the president's sacking of Daniel Yao Domelevo. It is equally untenable to insist that the Auditor General's report is not a complete or final product and therefore must not be published unless Parliament has debated it. Section 23 of the Audit Service Act's mandatory requirement for publication of the audit report immediately it is delivered to the Speaker of Parliament is sound, constitutional, and healthier for accountability. Finality of the report is not subject to Parliament. By Article 1877, the Auditor General shall not be under the direction or control of any person or authority and may order recovery of monies, issue disallowances and surcharges as he deems fit. This he does in the course of his work and not after the report has been debated by MPs. It is consequently plain that Parliament cannot vary, change, correct, or add anything to the report. If anyone feels aggrieved by his findings, the law directs them to appeal to the High Court, not Parliament. Like Yao Safomafo and others have successfully done in the past. Those aggrieved, they sue the Auditor General and not Parliament because it is the deed of the Auditor General. He is only supposed to draw Parliament's attention to irregularities which the MPs, representatives of the people, ought to know, and they must confront those quote-unquote indicted for misapplying funds, stealing, and other wrongdoing. The MPs debate and may give direction, particularly institutional correction, and exercise their oversight duty to monitor implementation of recommendations, including prosecutions to be done by the Attorney General. Parliament often does this job several years after the report has been issued. But can you imagine a speaker with blind loyalty to a political party or government being in any hurry at all to pass the report on to Parliament's Public Accounts Committee if it indicts his party or the government? If people have been found to have stolen money in 2019, we must wait until Parliament finishes debating the report in 2025 before we go chasing them to recover the money? If we don't answer the purpose for laying the report for debate in Parliament, we will not resolve this argument. The purpose is to notify representatives of the people about the findings, and the debates is to help them monitor implementation of the recommendations, not to change anything or direct the Auditor General about anything in the report. Dear Attorney General, abandon this course and focus on what you have started in assisting the Auditor General to recover misused and stolen money. I doubt you will contemplate a suit to be titled AG versus AG for the Supreme Court to pronounce on this, or that you will attempt to sponsor an amendment to get what you seek. CDD, Occupy Ghana, and many citizens shall work to defeat any such project. What we currently have is best practice. Those audited participate in the process from start to finish. And if submitting the report to Parliament is not in itself a publication, publication on the Auditor General's website is direct accountability to the people who fund government and the agencies that are audited by the Auditor General. Let's even improve this system so the audits will be timely, the publications will be faster, along with recoveries and prosecutions. Ace Ankoma, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, and all your friends who have sued you, sued the government, over the removal of Dome level, say to ask you if you will attempt to advise the Chief Justice in similar terms, because the judicial service, like the audit service, is also part of the public services under Article 190. Damn Lawyer Dame, damned, was in fact my initial topic. And that is my take. And this show, as always, is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Shasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. We will be right back, and we will begin from Bawku, where it has become clear that once there is an attempt to bring the wanted chief, because the state has declared him wanted, he ought to be arrested, and those involved in his enskinment, that since anytime he is found being transported into Bawku, it's very likely that the situation there will escalate. How do we de-escalate the situation? That's our job on Newsfile this morning. We'll be right back.
The enskinment was done Thursday morning by the king of the Mamprugu traditional area, of which Bawku is said to be part, now Bawku Abdullahi Mahamud Sheriga, together with his royal court members. It started with the arrival of the families and sympathizers of the 4 Mamprugu Gate in Bawku. Soon, scores of people in around Nalirgu began to gather at the palace to witness the historic enskinment of a Bawku Naba by a Mamprugu overlord after nearly 40 years. However, while the processes were ongoing, members of the Northeast Regional Security Council, led by the Regional Minister Yidana Zakari, arrived at the palace in the company of heavily armed security forces. The presence of the Regional Minister briefly halted the process as the crowd erupted in opposition against his presence and demanded that he leave the place. After a brief opposition from the crowd, Mr. Yidana, following the intervention of the palace elders, was allowed to engage the overlord in a short private conversation. Whilst on his way out after the meeting with the overlord, the crowd began to hoot at him and his delegation. A palace elder later told Joy News that the minister had come to accompany the overlord to Accra upon the invitation of President Nana Akufo-Addo. The elder added that the overlord turned down the invitation and told the minister it was too late to stop the enskinment. The enskinment processes then resumed and soon ended with the announcement of Na Seydou Abagari with a chieftaincy titled Na Akuluga II as the new chief of the Bawku Paramount Skin. Speaking to Joy News, some of the residents believe this enskinment would ensure the return of peace in Bawku.
The ban has never solved any problem. Bans have killed many people. We have seen many deaths, we have seen many maiming, we have seen many properties and lives destroyed. It has to stop. The youth, I am a young man and I feel very bad. Every time I see pictures of officers being killed, as somebody who is a parent, I feel very much aggrieved. I am not happy.
There is nothing like a Supreme Court ruling. So indeed, what the Nigeria has done today is the best thing to do. Indeed, this is a stepping stone to a resolution of the conflict or crisis in Bawku. I would want to entreat politicians to respect the chieftaincy institution. So the government should rather pay attention or concentrate on how to ensure that lives and property are not lost there. But as for taking the chief home, in fact, the chief will soon be home. There is nobody on earth that will be able to stop the legitimate Bawku Naba from getting to Bawku.
I expect everything to return to normal as usual. We've had it before during the era of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president. He created this thing in the first place. But after the overthrow of Nkrumah in 1966, the then Nayiri, the 30th king of Bawku, na Bongo Adam Badimso, and skin na Tampura Adam Zanjo as the 14th Bawku Naba. And you can go and check the history. Bawku returned to normalcy. Everything was moving on smoothly until the demise of the 14th Bawku Naba, na Tampura Adam Zanjo, before we had what we were having. So we are optimistic that everything will return to normalcy after this experience.
So everybody in Mampuru, Upper East, in North East, we are happy to see such a thing. For Nayiri to skin Bawku Naba, because all that place is for Yawa.
The new chief is a popular retired educationist whose grandfather was the 12th Bawku Naba. He was unanimously approved by the crowd as they burst into loud cheers amidst drumming and dancing. The new chief, Na Akuluga II, called for an end to all hostilities in Bawku.
Finally, like Bawku program that has existed for almost half a century has come to a close.
Elias Sutanko reporting from Nalirgu for Joy News.
The government must back its words with action. I mean, the statement that government does not recognize what happened as legal. The regional and national houses of chiefs definitely will not recognize what happened. The Supreme Court already has indicated that this matter should not be brought to it. So it is reduced to a simple question of law enforcement, and the president has directed that those who perpetrated the act, the police should go after them and arrest them. And so everybody is just watching to see whether the government is true to its words and whether law enforcement will take the appropriate action.
The members of parliament from Bawku Central, Zebila, Binduri, Pusiga, Timpani, and Garu, who include Honorables Mahma Ayaraga, Cletus Avonka, Abanga Abdullahi, Hajia Lardy Ayi Ayamba, Lydia Lamisa Kamvareba, and Honorable Albert Akoko Alazuga, that the Nayiri, Na Bohugu Mahami Abdullah Sherga II has purported to enskin a rival chief for Bawku. This is unacceptable and should not come from a person of his stature. Such purported enskinment is null and void and will not be recognized by any institution under the 1992 Constitution. The government of Ghana must take every step to ensure the maintenance of peace and security and hold perpetrators of this criminal act accountable. Meanwhile, the members of parliament for the area call on the people of the Kusauk traditional area and its environs to remain calm and assure them that this unlawful conduct will not stand. It is not enough to condemn the act. It should go further than that and make sure that the fellow doesn't act as a chief. That is important. Not words alone, but action, by government. There cannot be a rival chief in Bawku. There is one chief recognized by law, and that should be respected by everybody under this constitutional dispensation. So government should not just say that we condemn it, but make sure it doesn't work. No rival chief exists in Bawku. That cannot be tolerated. I'm very much surprised that this incident could not be nipped in the bud, that it could have been prevented.
Welcome back. Now, We have joining us for this very important discussion on the Bawku situation, Colonel Festus B. Abuaje, retired, author, conflict and security analyst, UNDP consultant on disarmament, South Sudan, adjunct member, Center on Democratic Transitions, Ghana, and former member, Save the Children International Military Advisory Group. Professor Kwesi Ening is Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. We have Mohammed Tahiru Nambe, who is lawyer and Mamprusi rep on the Bawku Inter-Ethnic Peace Committee. Also, Maxwell Agbambila is lawyer for the Bawku Naba. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much for making time to join us.
Well, good morning.
Good morning. Great. So, I'd like to ask to begin, and I would plead with Professor Ening and Colonel Festus Abuaje to patiently allow us to hear from the lawyers for the two sides. And then you definitely will come in and then help us to chat, the neutral, so to speak, way to peace. Of course, the two distinguished gentlemen, if you have any questions for any of these two lawyers, very much welcome. You could also ask them. So, Mohammed, the statement by the Republic is very clear, unequivocal, that what your clients have done is unlawful, is unconstitutional, is in breach of the peace, and because it is criminal, they ought to be arrested and prosecuted. What do you say? Please unmute your microphone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Senior Counsel Samson, Lardy, I admire you from afar. We do not know ourselves, but I think we get to know ourselves. I greet everybody who is taking part of this important discussion. And I actually greet all the audience who want to be educated and get involved in bringing peace in Bawku.
Great.
First of all, Mr. Samson, you would recall that this is a Republican state. It is not a monarchy. And everything that we do is regulated by law, that is the Constitution of Ghana. And the Constitution of Ghana, per Article 19.5, indicates that nobody should be arrested. I just want to paraphrase. Nobody should be arrested for a law that does not exist. Let's contextualize it. What the Nairi did the other time, last week, what is unconstitutional about it? What is criminal about it? It is rather the state, it is rather the republic, it is rather the government, let me put it bluntly, that is going to create problem that does not exist. The Nairi has done or had done things in accordance with the Mampuruku or Mampurusi custom and tradition. Assuming without admitting that the newly enslaved Bawku Naba is arrested, what would be the charges preferred against him? And we are prepared to meet anybody in the courtroom. We will not say that we will take the law into our own hands. No. We will meet everybody in the courtroom and exonerate our client that he did not do anything untoward as far as the laws of the country is concerned. That is my first and foremost commentary in respect of that. If I'm going to go further, Mr. Samson, Senior Counsel, I would indicate that the posturing of the government from the inception is not the best of it. The government has taken sides as if it is the agent of the Kusasis, which is not well, because they ought to be in between the protractors, the Mampusis and the Kusasis.
The government,
the government.
Mohammed, the government is the enforcer of law.
I agree with that.
Especially public law, including criminal law. So if the government's view is that there has been a process to enskin and which has actually been consummated in enskinning someone, contrary to the provisions in the Chieftaincy Act, and you know that the provisions are clear that if a person who is not hailing from and so on purports to put themselves up as a chief for which they are not, they are committing a criminal offense which is punishable by law.
Very well. We're talking about lineage here. I like that part of it. The Bokunaba who has been enskined by the Naibi, his grandfather was Bokunaba Kulga. His great-grandfather was Bokunaba Mambuda. His great-great-grandfather was Bokunaba Mahamba. His great-great-great-grandfather was Bokunaba Satim. He can trace his genealogy to the 15th, the first Bokunaba. Aburabu Azoka Nichema, as it were, apart from his father Aburabu Azoka, who was enskined as Bokunaba in 1957 per Nkuruma's fiat. I don't think he can say his grandfather had ever been a Bokunaba before. So just opposing the two of them, who hails from a proper lineage of chieftaincy? Ghanaians will look at this. Therefore, what we are saying is this. What we are advocating is that it's a civil matter. It's purely a chieftaincy and a causes and matter of chieftaincy. Let anybody who is aggrieved go to the court and, as it were, get back his rights. Mr. Samson, you are a lawyer. Your clients consult you most of the time, especially in civil matters. It's either they have a dispute with other people or other people have a dispute with them and institute a suit in the courtroom. Therefore, this one, we have the opinion that it falls within the realm of civil matter. The state does not have any hands in this. And causing the arrest of the newly enskined Bokunaba would rather exacerbate the situation. Therefore, the government should relook at it. There has been some threats, some pressure from especially the Kusasis that government should work it. I just heard Honorable Ayarika, that government should work its talk in enforcing the law. What is the beef of government here? So I rest it here, and then maybe when we proceed, I think things can unfold, then we'll get to know things better. Maybe if you have any further questions, that I will need to come in. Thank you.
Right. What do you say to the Kusasi youth movement, who both parties have issued statements, both youth groups have both issued statements, which I've had the opportunity of reading. What do you say to the Kusasi youth who suggest that what you are seeking to do is to do what they call domestic colonialism? That you are bringing a chief, naming a chief from another place, and bringing that person into Bawku, where there is already a chief. And that they have described as domestic colonialism. What do you say to that?
Samson, they have the right to describe it as they like. But the fact is that Bawku is part of Mampurugu. Mampurugu is Bawku. That's one fact that we have to establish. Secondly, there is no any colonialism. Bawku was established by Mamprus and named it as Bawku. Bawku is Mampruli. It is not Kusal. As I speak with you, my mother is Kusas. I speak fluent Kusal. Bawku is Mampruli. If they owned Bawku, what was the name of Bawku before the name Bawku was made? That is aside. Besides that, we have about 17 to 18 canton chiefs in Bawku. For that matter, now some have been elevated. It is only 5 of them that are being Mamprus chiefs, including Bawku. The rest, apart from Kulugungu, are Kusasis. Mamprusis are not advocated to go and become chiefs of Pusiga, which was begun by Mamprusi and now Kusasis are the chiefs. Mamprusis are not advocating to become the chiefs of Zebila, which is Kusasi dominated area. Mamprusis are not seeking to become chiefs of Garu and the rest. But Bawku, as we all know as lawyers, that the institution of chieftaincy is traditional and custom. Who began it? It is the Mamprusis that began the chieftaincy in Bawku. And there is nothing like colonialism as far as this thing is concerned. It is just that at a point in time, there has been a truncating of the processes and a lot of stress on the Nairi not to exercise his traditional role as the enskainer of the Bawku tradition. And Nairi thinks that at this time, that an ought to be removed. And then he's done exactly what the tradition demands of him.
So you mentioned something about Bawku being Mampruli.
Yes.
Apart from the claims that they make about asking and making an example that you cannot purport to install a chief in Asante land and bring that chief to Fanti land to become the chief of Fanti land. The question that is being asked again, you say Bawku is Mampruli land, is that when you read from various accounts, it is rather the Kusasi that dominates. And within the region and outside the region, nationally, collectively, the Kusasi far outnumber the Mamprusi. And there is one report constituted by the colonial administration then, which actually put it this way. Let me just read this portion of it for you. It says that both the red and white voters flow through the district and make it perhaps the most fertile district in that part of the country. Here it's talking about the northeastern corner of Ghana. And it says that the population is mainly Kusasi, but there are also Mamprusi, Moshi, Busanges, Frafres, and a few houses who live there permanently. However, the population of all other tribes put together does not come anywhere near the Kusasi figure, according to the 1951 census. There are over 147,000 Kusasis in the district. What do you say about that?
I do not intend to dispute any other thing, but it is, for me, it is a fallacy. You see, people tend to mix the traditional boundary with the executive boundary, the executive administrative boundary. Traditional boundary transcends beyond executive administrative boundaries. For example, you see the Anyenini, who has domain across the Bono area. Now, the Nairi owns Bawku from Nalergu, because the Nairi started in Bawku and moved to Kambaga, then and settled in Nalergu. Now, the Nairi explains Zoarungu, where you come from. Zoarungu, I know you are coming from Gambigo, but Gambigo is bounding Zoarungu. The Nairi explains the Zoarungu Naba. The Nairi explains the Tongorana, which is in Upper East region, not in the Northeast region. Samson, one thing that people don't understand is that if you come to look at the demography of Bawku, there are many people who call themselves Kusasis. If you go into their origin, they are not Kusasis. I'll give you the example. If you go to Kugri, everybody knows now that the Kugri enclave, they are Moses, they are not Kusasis. Dominica Zimbe and Co., they used to call themselves Kusasis, but they know they are Moses. If you come to Bugri are Zabrames, not Kusasis, but they speak Kusal. If you go to Binduri, they are Mampursis, but they speak Kusal. It doesn't mean that they are Kusasis. The demography, which some of us are aware, the population is contestable. We can contest whoever thinks that Kusasis combined are more than the rest of the tribe. I do not think that is true. Besides that, Chieftaincy is not talking about numbers. It's about authority of tradition. Who began it and who is supposed to be traditionally the originator of that institution. Not talking about population. And then also, Bawku is separate from Pusiga. Bawku is separate from Bugri. Bawku is separate from Zabugu. Bawku is separate from Zebila. But they bring all these together and box them just to confuse the understanding of other people. Excuse my language. But as we are talking about Bawku now, Bawku is predominantly Mampusis.
Okay.
Bawku exclusively with others, predominantly Mampusis.
Okay.
Therefore, Samson, we are saying that there is no any colonialism here. The Nairi is exercising his traditional authority and then is exercising his birthright to enskin Bawku as it began in 1721 until Kwame Nkrumah came in and this thing translated.
All right. Now, I'm going to your colleague, Agbambila, on the other line. But before I do that, all right, let me go to Agbambila rather. I'll put these questions to him, and then you may come in there. Thank you for joining us, Maxwell Agbambila.
Thank you.
Great. So as far as your side is concerned, the Bawku Naba is concerned, the statement from the state, as in the Republic, is perfect, except that the youth movement is not happy that the arrest that government, has ordered has not happened 4 days on, right?
Yeah, that is so. But before I answer that question, may I please be allowed to respond to a few of the comments that my friend Mr. Lambe has made. Indeed, I find his comments a bit, some of them are quite bizarre and convoluted. He attempts to give a history of founding and all of that. Now, the truth is that the Kusasi people historically were an acephalous group of people who were organized around the Tindana system. So in every community, there's a Tindana or a Tingbandan in Kosal, who is the head priest, and the whole community sort of revolves around him. In modern day, you can call him a chief. But they didn't exercise all of these functions of chiefs. The Tindanas don't wear big smocks and sit in state and perform all of those functions. What has brought us to this day is as a result of colonialism. And you all know that when the British came here, because of lack of human resource, they tried to use the indirect rule system So in any community, when they go, they find somebody who looks like a prominent person. They appoint that person, and then they use him for the purposes of their indirect rule system. When they got to our part of the country, you see, the Mampusis are naturally, I'm told, people of trading nature. So they used to trade to Ouagadougou, present-day Burkina Faso, and Tinkudugu, and all of that. And the story is that people used to waylay them along those routes, and then they will rob them of their wealth. So their chief sent some of their men there to man those areas. And because they had chieftaincy, more like the Ashantis, anywhere they are gathered, they would appoint one of themselves to be chief. We didn't have any problem with them. They don't own land in Bawku. They don't appease any of the gods in Bawku. You can ask him if he can tell us that all the gods, or what we call Tingbana, around this whole area, which of them that their ancestors or they themselves in present day can appease. But we're living peacefully with each other, along each other. When the white man came and then they were looking for a chief, our people didn't understand what they were talking about. On the Mampusi side, they found a man whom everybody resolves around, and they called him chief because, in any case, they had seen a replica of that in the Dagbon area and in the Mamprugu area. The whites settled there before they got to Bawku. That is how come they appointed a Mampusi man to become what is today called Bokunaba. And with the support of the white man, they had all these people they are today mentioning that now this, now that, and they call them the original chiefs of Bawku. It is not because they came and founded Bawku and started ruling Kusasi from day one. It was never the case. It was the advent of indirect rule that that gave them some power. So they started taxing a Kusasi man, and then the Kusasi started resisting. In fact, as far back as in 1932, the Kusasis had formed what was called the Kusasi Youth Association to fight for our independence. Now, when independence came in 1957, it coincided with the death of their Bokunaba at the time. I think a certain Yeremia. Then the Kusasi said that we are not going to allow a Mampusi man to rule over Kusasi land again. That is how come the Kusasis marked themselves up and then enskined the Naba Abugurago Azoka I. Issues arose. There was tension in Bawku. The departing governor established what is called the Afari Committee to look into the claims of the Kusasis, whether the Kusasis are the rightful people to be chiefs in Bawku or not. The report of that committee is clear and available for everybody to see. That the report came to the conclusion that the Kusasis are the rightful people to rule Bawku. The Mampusis indeed contested that report. The case traveled to the Court of Appeal, which was the highest court of the land. The highest court of the land, the Court of Appeal at the time, affirmed the decision of the Committee of Inquiry and said that Kusasis are the rightful people to rule Bawku. You can ask Lawyer Nambi whether he sees with that court that judgment of the court or not. Ask him whether he can produce a single full-blooded Mampusi man in Bawku. All of them. Their mothers are either Moshi, Isa, Kusasi, or Hausa. There is no single full-blooded Mampusi man in Bawku. The reason is, as I said earlier, that they came there for purposes of policing their trade route. And you know that it is men that you would send to do those things, even today, talk less of the days of old. So this story that the Nairi Fair settled in Bawku or founded Bawku, it's a total falsehood to the greatest of respect.
So he says something, that he doesn't understand the government statement about arrest. And the report you refer to, I will confirm portions because I hold them here in my hands.
Fantastic, senior.
But hold on, yeah. Then he says he doesn't understand what the government is seeking to say. Because if it's a matter he finds to be that of a civil nature. Now, in Article 277 of the Constitution, it says that unless the context otherwise requires, chief means a person who, hailing from the appropriate family and lineage, has been validly nominated, elected, or selected, and enstooled, enskinned, or installed as a chief or queen mother in accordance with the relevant customary law and usage. Now, Mohammed's point is that this is what has been done. So how can you call this process as a criminal one and therefore ask that there should be an arrest? Well, how will you respond to that?
Oh, but I think that with respect to him, that's a very bizarre and unfortunate interpretation of the law. He knows as much as I do that at the very least there's an offense called
Okay, Max Olagbambila, I'll plead with you to say you disagree with his point and then proceed.
Very well. I mean, he knows as much as I do that there's an offense called breaches of the peace. So if I get up and then go to Kumasi, because there's a Kusasi community in Kumasi, I mass up my people, or I get people to come to Bawku and say I'm going to be Asantehene, knowing fully well that what I'm going to do is likely to provoke Ashantis to react. Is that not criminal? He knows that every civil offense has a criminal equivalent in our books.
Some civil offenses.
So if you go and sit there and
some civil offenses, not all.
Engage in an act that you say it is purely civil, which has a criminal equivalent, we are saying that the state should activate the criminal equivalent of what they have done. And in any case, today, he's saying that we should go to court.
How do you, wait, hold on. How do you respond to the facts, which are facts that he speaks about the places where the Nairi is the one in charge of skinning the chiefs?
Samson, I heard him say the Nairi skins Zwarungu and all of that. I'm not a Fraframan. I'm not a Napt. If Zwarungu or Zwarungu people feel that they want to go to Nairi to be skinned, that is their choice. I mean, we respect that. But as far as we are concerned as Kusasis, we are not willing to go to anybody with an interpreter to be skinned because they speak Mampuli. I don't speak Mampuli. Again, the person that they purport to skin is supposed to come and be Bawku Naba. Bawku is a paramountcy with 25 divisions who are Kusasis. Is it his case that, so today, if the Zabila skin is vacant, the Zabila chief should go to Bawku with an interpreter to be skinned as a Bawku Naba? And he doesn't see that that is colonialism or apartheid? How is that in this present day democracy? That I should be forced to go to somebody whose language I don't speak to be skinned as a chief and to be controlled and ordered about by him? I think that, I mean, with the greatest of respect, that leaves much to be desired.
Okay, now
what we are saying is that the evidence is clear.
Now hold on.
Both in numerical strength.
Now hold on.
And the position
now
of
hold
the
on.
law.
Let me go back to Mohammed. So Mohammed, you know, your colleague has been referring to documentation.
Yes.
And first of all, the committee report he speaks about. I'll read a portion of that committee report to you. It says that the committee is satisfied. That is at page 14 of the report. The committee is satisfied that Abugrabo Azoka was not appointed, but elected by his own people and installed as the chief of the Kusasi area, in place of the usual Nairi appointed Bawku Naba. The committee is satisfied that the old method of appointing a chief to go to Bawku and rule the Kusasis is greatly resented by the Kusasis. We feel that it is as undemocratic as it is dictatorial for the Nairi who claims to be the nominal owner of the land to send one of his Mampurusi subjects to rule the Kusasi as their chief. We feel that the Kusasi will develop politically and socially as well as economically better under their own chief than under an imported chief whom they resent. The recognition of a Kusasi chief will no doubt receive the approval of all who know the internal affairs of the Mampurusi state as it is today. Finally, we humbly pray to report to Your Excellency that Abugrabo Azoka has been customarily elected and installed the chief of the Kusasi area. And this was signed by SD Opokua Fari, Chairman, Nanayao Ajiman Badu Domahene, who is member, and then Laurie Canton III, Tumokoro, who is also a member. And Agwambila proceeds to tell you that this decision of the committee to the governor was reaffirmed by the Court of Appeal. And in the Court of Appeal decision, which I also hold in my hand, it doesn't say anything to the contrary. What will be the basis? What would be the basis to jettison this history plus, quasi-judicial and judicial decisions in favor of Abograbo Azoka? Okay, I understand that we have lost Mohammed briefly. Yes, thank you very much. Mohammed, I understand you are back. So how will you respond to this? Hello, Mohammed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Great. Yes.
Senior Counsel, I'm grateful for this question. Before I go to your question specifically, let me address just two before I proceed respectfully.
That's all right.
One thing is about the colonialization. Maxwell knows too well that the Mampusi dynasty started in Bawku in 1721. The Union Jack was posted in Kampaga for the Northern Territories to become a protectorate in 1902, at which time Mahama Mampoda was the Bokunaba, the eighth Bokunaba. So the statement that the colonialists came with chieftaincy to Bawku is fallacious. In fact, it's not correct. Secondly, Senior Counsel, you are a northerner. You know, even in Bolga, there are Tindanes and there are chiefs. Tindanes don't perform the function of chiefs. Neither do chiefs perform the function of Tindanes. If Kusasis were Tindanes, he himself says that they were first earth priests. It doesn't mean they own the land. Earth priests. So that also settles that matter. The third point is that about the report in 1957 that said Abograbo Azoka was the Bokunaba. In fact, it must be put in record that Abograbo at that time was the first Kusasi Bokunaba. And
that was after the Mamprusis have been in the helm for 150 years, we are told, 150, according to the report.
But absolutely. Let's even agree with that, with the committee, that over 150 years. Can you imagine that? And we are saying that there was a political wing. When we are going to political, undertones, you realize that President Kwame Nkrumah had a problem with the Nigeria at that time because of the the Northern People's Party vis-a-vis the CPP. And therefore, there was a political undertone. When the report came, you recall that the Mampusis went to the High Court with a writ of certiorari to set aside that the findings and the recommendations of the committee, if you recall, Senior Counsel. And the High Court granted that certiorari. It was there that the government at that time appealed at the Court of Appeal in 1958. What happened? At that time, the Bokunaba, Yeremia Mahama, who was the 13th Bokunaba, and was supposed to be a respondent at the the Court of Appeal, was exiled. So the government, for that matter, Abograbo Azoka, had a one-way traffic. The person who was supposed to be the respondent was not in court to even defend himself. You can see the travesty of justice in there.
So, question.
Yes,
has that decision of the court validly made that you are aggrieved about? Has that decision been set aside?
Long time ago, because there have been actions after that decision. Let me tell you, in 1966, when Nkrumah was toppled, 1966, they passed, NLCD 112, restoring all chiefs, not only Bawku, because over 100 chiefs were affected by Kwame Nkrumah's regime. and imposters who didn't hail from any lineage of chiefs or chieftaincy were made chiefs because of political expediency. Now, NLCD 112 came to normalize that anomaly and restored the Bawku kinship to the Mampusis. In 1967, the Nigerian enslaved a Mampusi man, Elijah Adam Zangwego, called Tampuri. He ruled from 1967 until he died in 1981. So there have been an intervening action after that ruling.
Yeah, so my question now to you will be this.
Yes.
What is it that you took to the Supreme Court and withdrew on Tuesday, the 29th of April, 2003? What was that?
Yes. Senior counsel, I'm most grateful once again. It is simple as that. PNDC Law 75 conferred on Abugrago Azoka posthumously at the time that the law was passed. He had died, making him the Bukunaba, amongst others. And this Canaan Elijah Adam Zangwego, who was the legitimate Bukunaba and died in 1981 as Bukunaba, posthumously, once again. Both of them, the law satisfied them posthumously. Now, they conferred on Abugrago Azoka, and therefore, Anichema Abugrago Azoka benefited from that act because the father had died. Going forward, when the 1982 Constitution was promulgated, my Lord, Cinda, you realize that Article 270 talks about how chieftaincy is going to be. In the Constitution, it says that no institution, not even Parliament, can pass a law conferring on anybody chieftaincy. Chieftaincy must be in accordance with tradition and custom. I believe the Mampusis think that that law is the PNDC Law 75 that confers on Abugrago Azoka the chieftaincy contravenes that part of the Constitution. So they went to the court seeking for the interpretation of PNDC Law 75. Mr. Council will recall that Article 130 confers on the Supreme Court the jurisdiction of interpreting the Constitution. Is that not correct?
That's right.
So to the extent that the Mampusis thought that PNDC Law 75 was in conflict of the Constitution, they wanted the Supreme Court of Ghana to nullify that law.
Right. And the Supreme Court delivered itself this way. When you appeared and asked the court that you were withdrawing the case, the Supreme Court said that the application to discontinue is granted.
Yes.
But without liberty to apply under PNDC Law 75 and under Article 270 and 277 of the 1992 Constitution.
Yes.
And then there was cost that was given against the first defendant. These were the judges, Justice Aqua, Justice Ajoy, Justice Brobe, Justice Sambadu, and Justice Dr. Seth Chum.
Yes.
So the court said you are withdrawing your suit to challenge PNDC Law 75. They agree that you discontinue the case, but you are not permitted to come back to the courts, either under PNDC Law 75, which we understand had been spent, if you like, by that time or repealed, and you cannot also come to the court under Article 270 and 277. I just read 277. And 270 is what you just paraphrased a while ago. So this means that you appear to have lost the opportunity to ever go back to court on this matter. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, his line is frozen again. I wanted to conclude with him and then, okay. Yes. Hi, Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed. Okay. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. Hi, Mohammed. Please unmute yourself. Unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic. Okay. Maxwell. Hello, Mr. Agwambila.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great. So in 2003, they were in court, and then they withdrew the case. And the court said the case has been discontinued, but they cannot come back under PNDC law 75, which was the Chieftaincy Restoration of Statute of Chief. And they cannot also come under the Constitution under Article 270, which is about, who a chief will be and how to install a chief. And then Article 277, which defines a chief. So my question to you two is that this was a withdrawal or a discontinuation of a suit. So what are the implications of that?
Yeah, thank you. You see, first, I believe that it is because of this ruling. That is why they have, for the past so many years after 2003, not tried to go back, refused to go back to court. Of course, it is as clear as it is on the paper. And you are a lawyer, fortunately. You know that when you apply to withdraw your matter, whether or not you are given liberty to reapply will depend on the judge's assessment of your case in the first place. So judges don't just say, go and come back, or go and don't come back. They assess the strength of the case that you have presented before them. If it's a genuine error, which you want to withdraw and put your house in order and come back, then judges always give you liberty to reapply. The Supreme Court had assessed the documents and the arguments that they had made. And mind you, we all know, the three of us who are engaged in this argument, that the Supreme Court is not a place that you go and then when you file your papers, they put somebody in the box and the person comes to testify. Of course, unless in matters like election petitions. When you start seeking a constitutional interpretation, it is entirely about documentation. And by the time they were going to withdraw, both parties had submitted and filed their respective documentation back in their case. And seeing the hollowness of their case, they applied to withdraw with liberty to reapply. They actually wanted to reapply. The learned justices of the Supreme Court looked at the relative strength of the cases presented by both parties and said to them that your liberty to withdraw is granted, but you don't come back to us either under PNDC Law 75 or Articles 270 or 277. That is the reason why they have always refused to go back to court. Now, when it pleases them, today they are saying that what they have done what they did in Nalirugu is civil matter, so we should go to court. If you felt so strongly, like the argument that he's making about political decisions and PNDC Law 75 and all of that were wrong, you can always go to court. In any case, that ruling that you are talking about is from the Supreme Court, and we all know that the Supreme Court has liberty to depart from its previous decision. Yet, they refuse to go to court.
Right.
And as far as documentations are concerned, look, these unprincipled people, when they sue them, they'll shift the goalpost. Before they went to the Supreme Court in 2003, we had a peace accord in Damango.
Hold on, I'm coming. I want Mohammed. Mohammed, can we hear you now? Hello, Mohammed. Okay, so we are going to call Mohammed on the phone rather, so that we can conclude with him and you guys, so that we have Colonel Festus Abuaje and Professor Kwesi to help us moving forward.
Can I finish my point, please?
Wait. Just hold on. I'm holding the Damongo Accord, so to speak, in my hands here. So we are proceeding piecemeal and in a very orderly way. As Mohammed is being brought back on the line, this is the question, my next question I have for him. I'm holding in my hand a letter from Akufo-Addo, Prempeh and Co., written on the 29th of July, 2003. and it was written to the Secretary, Legal Advisor, the Bawku Skin Lineage, Solidarity Organization Elders, P.O. Box 56, Bawku, Upper East Region. And it says, attention, Justice Retired B. Yakubu, Bawku Skin Affair. It's very brief and it is important for context because you see, the Kusasi group have been saying there's a Supreme Court decision, and the Mamprusi group continue to say that there's actually nothing to hold on to. So I'm reading that and then ask Mohammed to a simple question, then we'll proceed. It says, as you, and this is written and signed by Philip Addison for Akufo-Addo Prempeh and Co. It says, as you are no doubt aware, on 29th April 2003, we discontinued our action before the Supreme Court, whereupon the action was struck out. We took the action because it came to our notice after we had filed our writ in the Supreme Court that the very law we were challenging, the Chieftaincy Restoration of Statute of Chiefs Law 1983, PNDC Law 75, had been repealed. In other words, the law we were challenging did not exist, and therefore there was no need for us to proceed with the case. It has come to our notice that some persons, notably of Kusasi extraction, have been deliberately distorting both the proceedings in the Supreme Court and the import of the proceedings. The effect of the action in the Supreme Court is that nothing was adjudicated upon, and the court made no pronouncement on the merit of the case that had been brought before it. The status quo ante was restored as if nothing had changed. Contrary to what some detractors are saying, this discontinuance did not put the Mamprusis in a worse position than before. Absolutely nothing changed. Of course, we know that what changed was that the court said you cannot come back on either that law or Article 270 or 277. Then it continues. The way forward now is to treat the issue as a pure chieftaincy matter to be determined in the Chieftaincy Tribunal. Says in the Chieftaincy Tribunal, instead of the Supreme Court, is it? It says that we urge caution and patience so that we do not stumble twice in our legitimate quest to right a wrong. In due course, we will send an outline of the precise course of action we intend to make and the precise Chieftaincy Tribunal in which we shall initiate the process. This, in a nutshell, is the state of affairs relating to the Bawku Skin. Hopefully, you will find this a satisfactory explanation of the present state of affairs. Respectfully submitted, Philip Addison, signed. So my question to you now is, this was your lawyer's advice, that yes, a civil chieftaincy matter. So you take it to a chieftaincy tribunal. And he said you were actually in the process to do so. What has happened? Mohammed, unmute, please.
Senior Counsel, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Very well. First of all, we are lucky to have you as a lawyer. And it makes the discussion very lively and very, very educative. You and I know that when you go to the court, you have the liberty to discontinue, but it is a discretionary something that the court can exercise. Yesterday at the High Court in Bolgatanga, I was there with lawyer Maxwell Abambila on the other side. And there was a similar application with the court, asking for liberty to come back. And the court said it is discretionary. The judge granted it. So they don't look at the merit of the matter before they grant. It is discretionary. Counsel, what they went to court was about interpretation. You and I know that matters of chieftaincy must start somewhere. by the Constitution and the Chieftaincy Act, you have to start from the traditional authorities. If you are not satisfied, you go to regional House of Chiefs. If you are dissatisfied with the verdict, you go to National House of Chiefs. If you are dissatisfied, then you go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Ghana does not have original jurisdiction as far as matters and causes of chieftaincy is concerned. So the matter before the Supreme Court at that time was purely an interpretational matter, not a chieftaincy matter.
Right.
That should rest it. Now, the reason why we did not go to court, actually, if you read Lawyer Addison's submission to us as his client, he said at the appropriate time, but it should have been a reasonable time. And at the time that we were supposed to go to court, not even the court, but to invoke the other chieftaincy tribunals, I think there was some disagreement in respect of when to go and when not to go. Samson, I will tell you that in 1983, the National House of Chiefs has a cause to pass a ruling. I am sure you have it because I know you are so that you have the dexterity and then you do so much research. There is a ruling of the National House of Chiefs in 1983, saying that Anichima Aburago's father, who is Aburago Azoka, was a commoner, and says that the Mampusis were the legitimate chiefs of Bawku.
Okay, well, please don't take us. Please, respectfully, Mohammed, don't take us back. I'm talking after 2003, when your lawyers wrote and advised you that the case has been discontinued, the status quo ante remains. You are now going to a chieftaincy tribunal. What happened after that? Why?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You and I, we know we are lawyers, and we go to court and we implore all tactics to see how we can work it out for our case to be won. If we did not go, then there must be a problem. The problem is not because we didn't want to go, but even in-house, we were thinking of the timing to go. And at the proper time, we would go. But we think also that we have had other legal opinions that, no. Once there was a National House of Chiefs ruling, then it makes our case a legitimate. Therefore, there was no need to go to anything. But we are trying to assess all this. But the Lardy thinks that, no, he can go ahead and do the escapement.
Okay. If finally, this reconciliation consultations among Kusasi, Mamprusi, Bisa, Moshi, Dagomba, and Hausa delegation from Bawku held at Damango from Monday, June 4 to Friday, June 8, 2001, under the auspices of the Bawku Peace Initiative. Among others, it was agreed that point 5, that the Bawku Naba be recognized and given the necessary courtesies and respect by all, including important official guests to the town. Point 8, that you are going to embark on a sustained program of stopping or at least curbing the purchasing and stockpiling of arms in the district. And the participants and signatories to this were from the Kusasi delegation, Alhaji Abdul Karim Apot, an elder, Thomas Abila, who has been speaking as a spokesperson for the Bawku Naba, was also participant and signatory. John Akparebu Ndebugre, youth representative, God bless his soul. Madam Lucy Awuni, women's rep. And then from the Mamprusi side, you had Seidu Akalifa Bugri, elder. Alhaji Sulemana Yeremia, elder. And that is significant. Clement Bugri, youth rep. And then Madam Hawa Ninchama, women's rep. Then there was a Bisa delegation, Moshi delegation, Dagomba delegation, and Hausa delegation. What happened to these two?
I believe it is coming to us, right? The question is coming to me.
Yes. So you had your representation at this Damango process,
yes,
which agreed to this roadmap. So why the developments now?
We do not. I don't think we went against that. We have been. Look, the historical antecedent was that before the agreement, any political leader who came to Bawku was denied going to the Bawku Nabas Palace and the Kemas Palace until that was signed, so that both agreed that anybody who came from Accra as a political man can go there. After the agreement, nobody actually impeded anybody whatsoever from going there or coming to us. It is rather the Kusasis who have a problem if somebody comes to us at that time, the regent of Bawku. So I don't think we have gone against that one. But that one also does not oust us of our right to pursue whatever is rightful to us.
Okay. Maxwell, I suppose both sides at this moment that the youth groups are agitated. I have seen press conferences and the pronouncements are clearly something that portends a danger, particularly if there is a movement of the now enskined, from the Nayiri to Bawku. What is it that you are doing to avoid that any matters? Briefly.
Yeah, thank you, but I think that you have given my friend a lot of time, and he said so many things that I beg that you give me time to respond to, so that they don't fly.
I give you 2 minutes.
Hey, my brother, 2 minutes may not be enough. It means that I have to rattle. All this is mentioning of 17 Bawku Naba, first Bawku Naba, and so on and so forth. There are two things I say about that. Before Ghana became independent, there were many governors. That is supposed to say that Ghanaian territory is the property of Britain now, after we gained independence and determined for ourselves that one self-rule. I think that's neither here nor there. I've explained to you how come Imam Pusis started becoming chiefs in Bawku. I am a Kusasi man. I live in Accra. We have an Accra Kusasi chief. When he comes home, we call him Accra Nab, like Accra chief. It doesn't mean that he can get up and say that he owns Ghana. And I told you to ask him whether he can show me one full-blooded Mampusi man from Bawku. Their mothers are all Kusasis, Moshis, Isses, and so on and so forth. It lends credence to the fact that when their men were coming to Bawku, they came there for business purposes and not to come and found it. When they came there, there were human beings living there. That's how come they married their daughters and have them as their sons today.
All right.
I also am worried that when there is a decision, whether it's a committee of inquiry report or a court ruling or a legislation, which favors Kusasis, number says that one is political. First, the committee of inquiry report of Nana Afari is a political one. The judgment is a political one. What went to the Court of Appeal was an appeal. It wasn't a matter that was litigated. And he knows that when you file an appeal, it's a matter of documentation. So whether the client was there or not, whether the chief was there or not, it's neither here nor there. In any case, the Court of Appeal was not going to recall him to come and enter the box. He knows that. When he files an appeal, does he call people to come and testify again? We all do these cases. We go to court. You can be in court litigating for years. Your client never appears. Once the lawyer is there and the necessary documentations are filed, the court will come to a decision one way or the other one day.
All right.
So why is it that when it comes to the Kusasis, any decision that we procure, which is in our favor, number them to come and say that, oh, it was political. Yes, it's not political. In fact, they have been the biggest beneficiaries of partisan politics in this country from inception.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maxwell. I'm sorry, but this is how much time will allow us. Thank you for your time. Now, let's take a quick break. When we return, we have Colonel Festus Abuaje, and we also have Professor Kwesi Enin. I hope that this morning we have given you sufficient both perspective, historical and current. Now you know where the two sides stand, and we know where, if things are not managed in a certain way, where it will get to. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. So earlier, we were speaking to the parties involved in the Bawku Chieftaincy crisis that have gotten to a head, and at a point where if care is not taken, things might just get really, really bad. According to the analysts, according to governments, national security, this may become a point through which this country will suffer if care is not taken. So we're speaking to Mohammed Tahiru Nambe, who is lawyer for and Mamprusi rep on the Bawku Inter-Ethnic Peace Committee, and then Maxwell Agbambila, who is lawyer for the Bawku Naba. Now, we will go to the domestic debt exchange matters and speak to Bright Simmons, Godfred Bokwing, John Ampochia Kuma, Dr. John Ampochia Kuma, and then Felix Kwachi Ofusu. We'll speak to them shortly. But now let's have Colonel Festus Abuaji and Professor Kwesi Enin on. Now, having heard the two of these sites, what can you say as your preliminary to this discussion? I'm going to come to you with direct questions, including that the Kusasi youth have issued a statement. They say they are disappointed in government, that it ordered the arrest of the enskined, newly enskined, and those involved. Yesterday, they said 3 days on, nothing has happened, and they themselves are going to, because they know where they can find them. If the government doesn't know where to find them, they will go effect the citizen arrest and hand them to police. The Mamprusi youth also have a position that what must be done will be done, and the Kusasis will not be able to do anything. So first of all, listening to these two sides, Professor Enin, what can you say summarily?
Oh, well, I think this is something that has been boiling and been expected. The state of Ghana has failed to provide the leadership and to prevent this from escalating to where we find ourselves to be today. And I think it spans from the issue of intelligence gathering, how that intelligence is used, who gets the intelligence, and the way it is subjected politically. And I think the decision to arrest this new Naba, the hooting of the regional minister, the decision that the arrest must be effected, but also very surprisingly, the decision by the RECSEC, the Northeast RECSEC, not to follow what the government is intending to do, seems to create a certain uncertainty as to what the core action must be. But let me make this very clear to the listeners, Samson, that no single chieftaincy issue must and can supersede the national interest of the sovereign people of the Republic of Ghana. That any chieftaincy issue that becomes problematic to such an extent that the state's survival becomes an issue must be dealt with all the extraordinary political powers that the state has.
And that's where I return to you on your judgment that the state has failed. And that's why we are where we are. Now, Colonel Festus Abuaji, listening to the two sides, what can you see? Look in the crystal ball. Please unmute your mic.
Sorry, good morning once again, and my compliments to Prof and their learned friends on both sides of the divide. You cannot discuss this current state of affairs in Bawku without, putting the approach of the government at the center of the discourse. I find it very, very difficult to think that, and indeed to admit that the government knew about the decision to install a new Bawku Naba in Alerigu so late that the only course of action by the government was to fly a helicopter there to invite him on the 15th, that's the Nairi, to come to Accra. You and I know that. It wasn't going to work. I err on the side of caution that the state knew or ought to have known that there were preparations to enskin a new Bawku Naba, and that if that event was allowed to take place, it was further going to complicate the ongoing conflict in Bawku proper. And therefore, using my military mind, the government should have, we call it interdiction, not to have allowed the forces that were advancing to the battlefield to arrive before now finding the capabilities to destroy them. The government should have done everything possible, including deployment of security forces in Alerigu, to stop the enskinment from taking place. Now, why the government didn't do that is another question that the government needs to answer. So I go very much with the idea that there had been an intelligence failure on the part of the government, whether deliberately or not deliberately.
Okay, so the two of you are on the same side. You agree on the failure of the state, intelligence failure, which has led to this. Now, Prof. Anyenini, so what? The government was supposed to have used military force to stop the, enskinment processes at the Nairi? Is that what you're saying?
Far from it. I traveled to that area between the 10th and the 16th of December last year to do some field work focusing on vulnerabilities to violent extremism and radicalization in the 5 northern regions. And the interviews in Alerigu and around pointed to the enskinment of a new Bawku Naba. That there were activities going on around the palace and amongst the leadership of the Mampusis. So it is impossible for me to think that the government didn't know about this. But there are two possible, pathways. And here my big brother Festus came to me. Either there was no intelligence failure in that sense, that the intelligence was picked up, the analysis done, and then it was sent up the chain of command, but at a certain point was truncated by somebody. Two, when His Excellency the President expresses his disquiet about the possible dangers that this might cause the country, I think the real question that should be asked, particularly knowing and learning from the Yendi crisis, the Dagon crisis, is for him to question who ought to have gotten a handle on this. Where did the intelligence get lost? Because I've spoken to enough of the people on the ground to know that the reports were written and they were sent up the chain. So where did they get truncated? Whose interests are being served? This is no more a Bawku crisis.
Okay. So
this is a Ghana crisis. And it is a Ghana crisis.
Why is it a Ghana crisis?
Because if we had time and I had to disaggregate the multiple interests who are feeding into this thing, they are not only located in the northeast or in Bawku, they are located in Accra. Those who are exploiting the insecurity through, trafficking networks are also benefiting. So the kinds of blowback that will happen if this new chief enters Bawku is that no amount of military force will be able to quell the anger and the violence between the Kusasis and the Mampusis.
All right.
Because they've been fighting arms for years.
Okay. So
and they've been waiting for this day.
So what should happen and what should not happen? The Kusasi youth say they know where the people are. They will go arrest this newly enskined and take him together with those who are involved to the police. What do you say?
Well, they should give the intelligence to the police and let the state act. We need to see the state taking the lead and the proactive steps.
They believe the state doesn't mean it. That's why it has not been able to effect any arrest since the announcement.
Then we are looking at war. When we are looking at war between these two groups and that insecure situation being exploited by all kinds of other people.
How do you stop the war? How do you stop the war?
It can only be stopped by the state being responsible and saying, this is why we've been voted into power. This is why we have our security agencies. They are trained. Let's give them the chance to deliver, and they'll be able to deliver. The state must be seen to the work.
Colonel Festus Abuaje, the Minister of Defense was in Parliament and said this was not a chieftaincy matter. You and I discussed this last week. He said this was not a chieftaincy matter. It was a criminal conduct. Has he been proven wrong?
Well, he doesn't need to be proven wrong. In fact, that statement was inaccurate. And secondly, that statement was inappropriate because all of us who are involved in conflict resolution know that one of the things you should not do is to put labels on the parties and make them look as if they are stupid. They don't know what they're about. So for instance, listening to Mahmoud and Maxwell, you need to give them your ears and try to figure out, understand very deeply where they are coming from and not to rubbish what either party is saying. So yes, some of the activities or actions might be criminal, but they are informed by the beliefs of the people who are involved. And I would have wished that the defense minister didn't go to Parliament to make that kind of statement. And then, of course, draw fire from a member of Parliament who also responded. And I've suggested that in that context, Parliament has become a proxy battlefield. Right. Instead of being a proactive, entity in.
Do you share the view that we are at a point where war, quote unquote, is almost inevitable in Bawku?
First of all, if your disposition is towards the use of force, which is what I think, that the government has consistently been predisposed to the use of force, then you might ignore or disregard other approaches short of the use of force to try and mediate, such conflicts. It's not too late. The situation is very complicated by other external factors that I think Prof was alluding to, but it's not too late. And I think that the prospects are also very, very difficult.
Sorry, it's not late. It's not late to do what?
It's not late to try and get the parties to de-escalate, to roll back a bit. For instance, I would not support the idea of arresting Alhaji Seidu Abagri, I wouldn't subscribe to that. But I think the government can use other mechanisms to get the Nairi to redraw that event, and put it on hold until such time that other approaches have been,
just hold on, Professor Kwesienin, is this possible that the Nairi will agree to a withdrawal of what has already been done? Hello, Prof. Enin, please
that
unmute
will
your...
almost be impossible.
Sorry.
The state... Yes.
Is it possible?
No, that will always be impossible. I mean, the state will have... No, he will lose face, and he can't afford to lose face.
They are determined to bring him. They are determined to bring him to. They are determined to bring him to Bawku, and the Kusasi are also determined to stop them.
Well, the lines are drawn. I think I really like my big brother's, optimistic view that we haven't reached the tipping point. And I think probably we need a larger stakeholder group, because for Colonel Abuaje to present this argument, for me, shows the experience and the nuance that he's bringing to the table. He's seen war before. He's seen firepower being used in anger. And I think his concern here is that, look, we can't allow our own citizens to turn this firepower against each other, because the state is only interested in using the military force.
Right.
Because if I can just argument further, I mean, the state routinely will only dust off, oh, let's bring in cash, let's send in more troops. But I think Abuaje's point is, it's time for us to begin to look at alternatives and to move back or to push back from the brink.
Okay, so gentlemen, I'd like you to leave us on the note of listing at least 2 important things that the state or the parties should be doing. Can we start with Colonel Festus Abuaje? There's a suggestion already that radio should be, as it were, halted. There should be the NMC and those parties should come in and simply, if you like, quote unquote, ban radio or media broadcasts in the area for now. What will you say? 2 things, just list them, that the state or the party should be doing now.
Before my 2 points, let me suggest that we also need the media as part of the public information effort. So if we close down the radio stations, how are we going to educate, the population? First point, that some of the mechanisms that both parties, that's Mohammed and Maxwell, expatiated, did not mention presidential initiatives. But former President Kufuor played a role. Vice President Mahama played a role. And within the same year, late President J.A. Mills also played a role. In fact, he traveled to Bolgatanga to meet the parties. Now, I would suggest that the incumbent president seizes this opportunity to travel to the area, whether Nararigo or whether Bolga or wherever it is, in order to try and, get the parties to tone down. But all the rhetorics that are going on are not helpful. Secondly, I've said previously that these kinds of protracted social conflicts are never resolved through the use of force. It's not going to happen. Not today, not tomorrow. At the end of the day, we need to sit around the table with the parties and facilitate mediation or whatever it is. So The government, being the central authority, must use other institutions within the state and get the parties to sit around the table and talk. But the government, I believe, can write to the National House of Chiefs through appropriate channels to get the National House of Chiefs or Regional House of Chiefs or whatever it is, to take an active role or play an active role in this. These are the 2 points. First,
thank you.
We need to hear from the president, and he should not speak anything in Accra. He should go to the area and talk to both parties on the ground. And then, at the same time, he must convene a certain process. Now, who are part of the process? Traditional leaders, religious bodies, civil society organizations, for instance, who put on the table the Damango Accord and established the interethnic Bawku, peace committee and so on. All of these can be explored to try and resolve this conflict.
And the pursuit to arrest should be aborted. Thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Anyenini.
That will not work.
2.
Yes.
First is to recognize the emotional side of intractable conflicts. And listening to the 2 representatives, they all have the history, they all have the way they interpret it, they all have the legal side. All that is underpinned by these strong emotions of a sense of righteousness. And we need to recognize emotions as played a critical role in it when we try to solve or resolve in conflict intractability.
All right.
2, is that we need an efficacious state, a state that is responsive, a state that is dialogic, a state that uses its own established institutions to push the boundaries of the powers of the state.
Okay.
We are now seeing a very ad hoc use of that state power. And it is that failure and ad hocism that has brought us to where we are. The state must be more responsible.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time to help us. And we hope that all well-meaning Bawku and Mamprusi citizens across the country are listening, and those who have the influence necessary should also assist to make sure that this works. As we know, our friends from our neighbors are already trooping in through that area, and as we have been told by Vladimir Chidansu and the rest of them, this could be the gateway for terrorist infiltration in the state of Ghana, and we don't need that. This show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider. My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on the MTN to join. And then St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. And I can't forget to also bring to your attention that we are informed that the Northeast Regional Security Council has not formally communicated a decision not to comply with the directive to arrest the chief. This is the information, that the Northeast Regional Security Council has not formally communicated a decision not to comply with the directive to arrest the chief. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's not been that easy getting the first part of this show over. It's been a difficult production, beginning sometime in the afternoon throughout to late in the night. The calls and the messages, and I'm like, whoa. Once matter that is going to be discussed. All right, now let's welcome our guests for the second part, as in the domestic Debt Exchange Program. Bryce Simmons is Honorary Vice President Imani Africa. He joins us by Zoom. So is Godfrey A. Bokping, Professor of Finance and Economist, University of Ghana. Dr. John Ampuntua Kuma, MP Ejiso, and Deputy Finance Minister. We have Felix Kwachio Fosu, former Deputy Communications Minister and NDC parliamentary candidate for the Ebura Aseibu Kwama Kese. He's right here in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. Thanks for joining us in studio.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Great. So first, let me start with you, Bright Simmons. We have been reading the articles, well researched as always, that you have authored. As far as this matter is concerned, you and Dr. Theo Echampong believe that the numbers as posted by the finance minister are looking rather magical as far as the success rate of over 80% of subscription to the program is concerned. What's the concern really?
Make a quick presentation to provide some backdrop to the comments that we've been making so far.
Hello, Bright.
Yes, can you hear me?
Because we have like just about less than an hour. Is it possible to hear you in the next maybe 5 to 8 minutes? You know, bring us the jugular as regards the real concern about the numbers.
Yes, I'll try and be very brief.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know if the screen is responding on your side. Are you able to see my screen?
Right. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so the key point is that in Ghana we have debt of. First of all, we have to be very clear that when we talk about the debt in Ghana, we are not only talking about the securities, the debt that you can buy and sell, which is the bonds, the treasury bills, and the rest. We have other types of debts like the loans, the overdrafts, etc., etc. And if you add all of that together, it's way in excess of 250 billion a day. With the government's servicing of debt covers all of this. So when we are looking at the securities, the bonds that, and remember, we are not even at this stage touching the treasury bills. We're only doing the bonds. So the servicing of the bonds is what we are talking about. But that does not mean that if you restructure the bonds alone, you are out of your problems. There are other types of debt. So that's the first point. The second point is that we've got to a point where we're spending over 70% of all the tax revenue that we generate servicing the debt. And the government in its latest release suggests that had reached almost 85%. So the whole purpose of this exercise is to spend less of our tax revenues on debt, because we are spending so much of our money on debt that unless we're able to reduce the amount we spend, the country was going to shut down. That really is why we did this debt restructuring. We also now been told that we've got to the point where every time that they announce that the government has gone to the market to raise debt, and they come up with all these impressive numbers, 3 billion has been bought or 2 billion have been bought. What we're not being told is the people buying this debt now includes the Bank of Ghana doing a big chunk of the buying. So a lot of the so-called oversubscription in treasury bill markets and the rest that we're seeing actually involved Bank of Ghana stepping in because investors were not buying enough. We didn't know all of that. So the situation was very dire. And from the debt sustainability analysis, we're going to get to a situation where in a few years, maybe 4 years down the line, we spend more than 100% of all the money we raised paying debt. The success of this exercise is dependent on whether or not that problem has been reduced. Are we spending all our money paying debt or not? So when you look at the current situation, this is what happened. This is a red intelligence graph that shows you how much of the debt that we had, the bonds. Remember that we're only now talking about the bonds. were tendered in, how much the government wanted to restructure, how much of it was accepted, and how much of it was not. Now here is the government's breakdown of how many individuals turned in old bonds to get new bonds. And the purpose of turning the old bonds to get new bonds is that the new bonds are cheaper for the government. Now, if you look carefully, you will see that the category A and B are just all individuals. The pensioners and the non-pensioners, they are all just individuals. And individuals hold about 20 billion. So from what the government got in total, about 75% of them did not do it. Then you go to the rest, which is, everybody else. And everybody else, going by the initial discussion that we had, you are talking of something in the region of about 110, 115 billion. Of that, they got 76 billion. So those are the numbers that you have to keep in mind as we get to the analysis. And the analysis is pretty simple. When the government went out to the market to do this, it wanted to tackle the bonds, not the other types of debts. So in the bonds, or among the bonds, 137 billion is what the government felt it needed to change the terms to reduce the interest rates and the pace at which it pays back the principal. And that 137 billion is your base. That's what you are trying to fix, or what we call treat. So that number is a very important number. That was in 5th December 2022. Then the government came back again, and because of all the back and forth, it realized on 7th February, almost at the end, that it needed to change the document that people were supposed to sign. Basically, the prospectus, that is the contract, the new contract with people that have the debt. And in that document, it said that the debt that is trying to deal with, the bonds, is about 130 billion. So that 130 billion becomes the new base. That's the amount of debt you are trying to fix. That's the amount of debt you can't afford to service. When the final participation then came in, when people had finally done everything on 10th of February, and then the government communicated back to us, they had reduced that number of total debt that they are trying to treat to something around 97 billion. Now, what we are saying is that these are gimmicks in a way. And it's nice to tell a good story, and it's true that this got then covered internationally. That suggested that the one had hit 85%. But the truth of the matter is that that was only because you reduced the total amount of bonds that you claim you now need to fix, or you are able to fix, which is what they call the eligible debt. So you only get the 85% if you don't use the final adjusted number, which is the 130 billion, but if you use the 97 billion. The reason why that is important is the whole purpose of this exercise is because we can't pay the debt. So if you're only treating a small percentage of the problem, then the bigger problem remains. So that is the key issue at stake. That 85% participation rate, it's a good looking number, but it doesn't reflect the reality of how much debt the government felt at the end of the program, not at the beginning, at the end of the program on 7th February, was critical to be treated in order for the government to be able to continue to service its debt. That's the argument that we are making. Secondly, and this is very critical, and it's surprising that when this matter went to Parliament, parliamentarians did not dwell on this issue. Part of the reason the government has given for, or actually the full reason the government has given for reducing the amount of bonds it wants to treat or it wants to restructure from 130 billion to 97 billion is that first, they discovered eventually that some of the debt that they wanted to restructure was not actually valid for this exchange. But we only know that only the pension funds were explicitly said not to be valid for the exchange. Everybody else was invited to bring in the old debt and get new debt. So if that is the case, and we take out the pension funds out, that is around 9 billion or so out, we are still left with way more than 128 billion or something like that, not 97. So the government then comes up with a second reason, which is that some of the bonds have been now changed to treasury bills. But if that is the case, we need to be told the terms. How it can't be that almost 40 billion have all been changed to treasury bills, because our current treasury bill volume is about 57 billion. If we add that to it, that would mean our treasury bills volumes is almost now 100 billion. So it must be a very small proportion of it, or at the very least, it's not the majority. Secondly, the treasury bills are more expensive because they have shorter duration. I mean, for the government, they have shorter duration and they have higher interest rate. So if we've done it in this way, and the current rate of treasury bill is what is being applied, then ultimately what we have now is a situation where we've increased the cost of borrowing for the government by almost 30 billion. So somebody has to explain very critically to us which bonds have been, how much of bonds have been converted to treasury bills, for whom, for what reason, what was the interest rate on the new treasury bills, and what is the duration? Because that would tell us that if we don't calculate it properly, it will mean that by the time the government ended the debt restructuring, it actually increases debt burden, not saved. Because if it's true by pure calculation that we have changed 40 billion of bonds into treasury bills, reduce the average tenor from about 3.5 years to 1 year, which is what a treasury bill must be under 1 year, and increase the average interest rate from about 19% to 35%, because that's the average interest rate today, then the new cost to the government is almost 30 billion. So the savings that the government has made in this scheme, which is around 12 billion or less, it's actually less than by the time that we conclude the transaction. We've actually have increased government debt servicing by almost 18 billion. That's very dangerous. And we see that now international media is scrambling to try and interpret this by trying to put the two numbers side by side. This is Reuters' latest report. People are confused, really confused. Last critical point. The debt restructuring can be, whether or not it was successful, can be assessed on two key parameters. One was how quickly it was done, and number two is how much relief government got. And if you've seen my analysis so far, it appears government did not get much relief. And that is not surprising because this is the debt restructuring we've seen in the world with the lowest participation rate. If you use the debt that government at the end of the exercise claimed it was treating, which is 7 February, 130 billion, you get a participation rate of around 63%, which is lower than what we've seen in the last 2 decades anywhere in the world. And the debt relief is very small. The positive side is that it was also the fastest we've seen in the world. So the government has traded speed for debt relief, and that's very, very, very critical. Why did the government not get a lot of participation rate? On the domestic scene, it didn't do consultations. It waited till 2nd December before it met the banks and told the banks its full plans. Everything that it did before did not involve the actual plans of what it wanted to do. So the consultation period from 2nd December, and then by 5th December, it had formally launched the program. Nobody has ever done that anywhere in the world. Even in Uruguay, which has had the fastest before Ghana, they spent 2 months discussing the plan and then launched the program, and then they spent 7 weeks in the program itself. The second critical point is that on the international front, some international investors hold our bonds. And that's, I think, in almost 20 billion or so. Those international investors, they needed roadshows. Our checks suggest that government pension funds like the government of Denmark pension fund, the government of Japan pension fund, were not even approached. They were not even discussed that this is what Ghana was doing. Meanwhile, we have signed deals with Citibank allowing our local debt to be sold internationally through global depository notes. So there are a lot of international investors, small-scale investors holding a few $1 million who were not even approached. There were no roadshows. There were a lot of funds that, as I've listed on my screen, that were not even approached. So we have a huge problem with the consultation, not only domestically, but internationally. So the last point, what does this mean going forward is basically whether or not the new bonds that have been issued will get a better rating. Because if the rating agencies do not change their mind and continue to maintain it at restricted default, the liquidity will be low regardless of whether you have an old bond or a new bond. And those who have the old bonds will do far better. And that is a very important point. Secondly, we have a critical issue because the 12 billion cedis or so that we've saved is far lower than the 52 billion or so interest rates that we are expecting this year alone. So, and next year we get even less relief because they front-loaded most of the benefits. What that means is that even if we get Eurobond relief about 50%, we still need about 2.5, and get the IMF money, we still need about $2.5 billion from somewhere. Most likely, this money must come from fiscal adjustment, cutting expenditure. The tax performance is so far not doing too well. We keep on going from crisis to crisis every 4 years, recycling a different type of crisis from this.
Okay, so did I lose Bright Simmons there? Hello, Bright, are you back?
Sorry, but when did you lose me?
Just that point. It's all right. So proceed. If you can wrap up in a minute.
So what I was saying was that we have got this chain of crisis where we change from fiscal crisis, that becomes a debt crisis. Then in time it becomes a power crisis. Then it changes to a fiscal crisis, and it's been going on and on and on. This particular crisis should not be allowed to mutate. We must fix it at the core, and we must fix it at the root. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bright. Now, Professor Bawku, I've listened to you over the period. Now here we are. So it's Uhuru, is it?
I think the the outcome of the domestic debt exchange is a reflection of the strategy government adopted. If you want more participation, that would inform the kind of approach that you needed to adopt. So we are not surprised. We are not surprised that we got it. But of course, I can also understand some level of adjustment to the universe of the base, that from the December 5th announcement, pensions were included, and that had been excluded. So almost 30 billion will be taken out. Then some kind of short-term swap arrangement Bank of Ghana does as
Prof,
part of
the pension is about 9 billion.
Okay, some kind of swap arrangement that
the pension is 30 billion actually. Just to put that, it's not my intended, but it's 30 billion.
But that's important. So, Prof,
Yes,
Prof, and Bright, have you heard?
Well,
the minister
then we
says,
have to look at the CSD numbers, because that is not what it shows, the CSD numbers. So 30 billion, okay,
Yes,
leave it as
Samson.
a matter that we'll discuss later.
Samson, I mentioned earlier 30 billion.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. So because I was working with some kind of data. Okay. So I'm always open to amend if that is not correct. And that is why when Bright interjected, I kept quiet.
Okay.
Okay. So you need to adjust that. Then there are also some swap arrangement as part of our international reserves management. They are usually short term, with underlying debt, right? So if you are changing that to, let's say, a 15-year, that would disadvantage those holders. And perhaps the reason they saw the need to maybe convert it to treasury bills and all of that. But on the other hand, also I lean towards Bright's argument that if you look at the interest rate and the proportion of treasury bill within this whole portfolio, we are almost at the point where we will arrive at a zero-sum game, right? If we are not careful in terms of what we want to achieve. So I lean towards Bright's position on that. My considered view is that if we are able to resolve this domestic debt exchange, and this is to treasury bill holders, and then also the external, and then we get the IMF program, everybody should know that the future of treasury bill will not be this high. Okay, because that will create a distortion in the market. So there will be incentive on the part of the government to drag down the treasury bill rate. And that will not be so difficult to do, because it's not one day when it matures, government will be willing to roll it over at a much lower rate. And they need to do so quickly in order to give much backing to the tradability of the new bonds at much lower rates. Other than that, investors are rational.
But okay. Prof, help me. How was this done? Conversion into treasury bill, and I only heard it at the end. If it was an opportunity available to individuals, I suppose I may have opted for that.
Yeah, my government needed to look, Samson, I'm with you on that point, as well as Bright. Government needed to calm the market, and so they need to provide a lot more information. I don't want to share everything here, because the data I have and the volume involved here, I became a bit suspicious, okay? Whether maybe the more equals didn't take advantage of this and did something else. And given that this is Ghana, you rule out everything at your own expense, right? So I think that there would have to be the need for a bit more information. And the reason I've not been happy with this post-DD domestic debt exchange communication, it has been very poor. You know, government needed to adopt an approach that calms the market with greater information and transparency.
But the communication, many will say, has been rather reactionary or compelled. If you take the pensioner bondholders issue and Justice Sophia Akufu's involvement and all.
Yes, and that has been a bit concerning for me. You know, we could have done this in the 80s and 90s, but now if you look at the composition of our debt stock, we are more open to market sentiments and all of that, and that will inform whatever strategy that we adopt. And Samson, I have personally been disappointed with the approach, okay, that we have adopted. And look, and it's not going to be that easy with the external debt. And also, I blame the domestic debt holders, because they were all looking for their individual interests. Talk about the Bankers Association and the rest of them. If we had formed a domestic creditor committee, we could have negotiated from position of strength and demanded a bit more information. Look, for the external creditors, they would demand the assumptions underlying the domestic debt sustainability analysis, validate it, and all of that. So it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that easy, but at least government walked away with the domestic debt, treated us as subjects whose only response was to comply. And of course, you can see what we are getting in here from that. So I think that we need to, that's why we said that government needed to present a comprehensive picture of the end game. What needs to come from fiscal adjustment, debt restructuring, structural, and all of that. That transparency would have helped the market and probably
fiscal adjustment, that aspect that you guys have been very disappointed about. Let me bring Dr.
Samson,
Dr. Kumar.
very quickly.
Yes.
Just before you go on, can both Prof and the Minister tell us whether the pension fund holdings they are describing is both treasury bills and bonds, or just bonds? Because my understanding, and I just double checked from CSD's data, is that the 9 billion is bonds. And so if it's 30 billion, that includes treasury bills. So that would be an important clarification going forward. But that's something we can always double check.
Dr. John Kumar, are you in a position to respond to this quickly before?
Oh, yes. It doesn't include T-bills. Is the value is 30 billion for pension funds. So he needs to check the source again.
All right. So government is happy at this moment, even though you are running against time. Now Parliament wants you to come over. How does it look going forward?
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to listeners and panelists. I listened to the presentation by Bright Simmons, and I'm happy that Professor Bobkin corrected the figure. I think that is the basis for the analysis he did, which I disagree. In fact, the 5th December figure he gave of 137 billion was correct, but because of the delays, by the time we got to 7th February, it has reduced to 130 billion because some settlements have been done. And then the eligible bondholders, that is what we talked about, the 97.7 billion. And the difference between that is the 30 billion for the pension funds, not 9 billion, it's 30 billion. And then, so you're supposed to get 100 billion. And then we did the exchange rate financing policy, the swap. That is what you are talking about, those who got the T-bills. These are short-term exchange rate financing policy of the Bank of Ghana that could not have been converted into 5-year bonds. So that amount is 2 billion, not 40 billion as presented by Bright Simmons. So those are the figures that I think he should look at in his analysis. So on the whole, I agree that maybe a different approach could have been adopted, but I think that government is grateful to all domestic bondholders for their contribution and acceptance to be part of the program, to the Bankers Association, the labor unions, individual bondholders, and everybody who has played a very vital role in this process. We are very grateful. We must also remember that we had a target going forward. I mean, Bright raised issues about other loans and bonds and commitment that has to be paid beyond the treasury bonds. We must know that government set a target after the debt sustainability analysis. And we targeted that by 2028, we should bring the debt levels to 55%. And so that has been the basis, the picture for where all this engagement has been running from. And so in all the analysis, we believe that if we are able to deal specifically with this group of debts, the bonds, we'll be able to hit the target as set with all parties involved at the 55% by 2028 and that kind of thing. So we believe that we are on course. Of course, we should be open to market sentiments, advice from Professor Bobkin. And so all these things that we are doing, we are taking some of these concerns on board so that at the end of the day, the market is able to see The 30 billion pension funds that we were taking out, government agreed with the pension and labor unions to take that out for a different treatment. So it's not going to be part of the domestic debt exchange. But I know engagement is still ongoing to see how best we can make it beneficial to all parties involved and even bring greater benefits.
The individual bondholders have not been excited that government has defaulted on, maturing, bonds, and actually Fitch cites that as one of the reasons for its ratings that it has brought out recently. Hello, John. John's line is frozen. I hope that we're able to establish contact with him again back quickly. But the government said that it had made approximately 85% of holders of a legal. Yes, John?
Okay. So that issue is a problem of communication. Samson, in the memorandum that we put out, we stated in it that once the DDE was in the process, we could not be settling maturities until we are fully completed. So we want to fully assure all bondholders who have due maturities that they are going to be settled ASAP. By the grace of God, we have come to the end of the process. And once settlement is done, all the due maturities will be paid in the shortest possible time. So it's been already communicated, except that I think it has not been clear to bondholders.
Right.
So they are going to
there's been mounting pressure to do more than the focus on, debt restructuring, the manner in which you are doing it, including, cutbacks and so on. Professor Bawku mentioned that a while ago. There's very little heard about that from the government.
It is true. One concern that we've heard a lot about fiscal adjustment, further expenditure cuts, and government has already announced about 36 measures in the 2023 budget on expenditure measures that will seek to bring down expenditures going forward. But I think beyond that, people want to see much more commitment on the part of government. Going forward, those are cabinet policy directions that will be announced very soon as part of our program. So we also want to assure that government has their eyes on it. And
how was the conversion to, as it were, treasury bills? How was it done? So that some people feel disadvantaged. Because when I went to my bank, if I knew about this and it was available to me, I would have opted for that.
No, it wasn't available to you.
Why?
These are not bonds that were raised for budget support. These are special Bank of Ghana exchange rate financing policy. That is short term. So it's a special instrument. And it's only those who are on that are qualified to be on this, because the minimum we are getting on the new bonds is 5 years. So if somebody has a short-term arrangement with you within 1 year for you to return his facility, you cannot take it into 5-year bonds. That is why the conversion was done to T-bills. So it wasn't.
Who are those who are on such a special, arrangement for bonds you talk about?
Yeah, our central bank has arrangement with other central banks and to sometimes exchange, and of course other partners to sometimes take forex in the short term for business and also to repay within a certain period. So those arrangements are always there within the Bank of Ghana and other central banks.
Okay. Yes, Felix.
Yes, Samson.
Yes.
You listen to these numbers, and if you are not careful, you would miss the entire point of what is under discussion here. These numbers represent pain and suffering for people who bought government bonds in the hope that government will keep its word and that when the time was due, they will be paid their interest on which they live and on which their sustenance is based. And that when time also falls due, they will be paid their principals. Now, as we speak, these people have been compelled to forfeit those interest payments that they were looking forward to, and the principals that I'm sure they had planned their lives and expenditure for this year and subsequent years around. So even as we recite and have these numbers roll off our tongues, we must remember what they mean. It means that pensioners, some of whom went out to demonstrate, it means that individual bondholders, it means that financial institutions have lost significant amounts of money that they had planned their lives around. Indeed, there are financial institutions that look forward to the proceeds of these bonds to constitute about 70% of their annual revenue. And if a financial institution does not receive 70% of its annual revenue in one particular year, you can imagine what will happen to that institution. There are people who have to incur some expenditure. They have to pay fees for their wards. Some of them have to depend on these monies to buy medications for themselves. They have chronic diseases. Some of them are in their old age. Some, I'm sure, do not have any breadwinners. Some may not be married, or their husbands may be dead. They may not even have children. And so this is how they live. So when the government comes telling you or celebrates the fact that they have achieved 80% compliance rate for this domestic debt exchange, you must appreciate what they have done to the people of this country.
We certainly are not oblivious of
Absolutely.
that. And as I mentioned to him, you hear me put myself in
that position, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Yes, because I am one of those numbers.
Exactly. So you feel it perhaps better than myself.
Now, I've had to lead clients to go to insurance companies to talk about claims, among others, deal in banks. And it is very obvious that the situation is really bad. Exactly. But that's where we are, and we are supposed to burden share, according to the finance.
But there's no such burden sharing. Indeed, the posturing of this government does not suggest that they even appreciate what they have put people through. 2 days ago, the finance minister was in parliament asking us to rejoice in the Lord for bringing us to this juncture. It means that he, Alhaji Bawumia, who is supposed to be the head of our economic management team and the president, have buried themselves in a delusional bubble. They don't appreciate what they have done. Indeed, if we were a country where honor was an important factor in our national lives, these people would have been long gone. Alhaji Bawumia would have left, or he would have been fired as head of the economic management team. The finance minister would have been fired. Indeed, it would not be far-fetched to even suggest that the president himself would have resigned for ensuring or supervising such an economic catastrophe. And you see, it is not that they did not know that we will get to this juncture. Samson, as I speak to you, from a position where we owed about 120 billion Ghana cedis in 2017, and indeed, I urge everybody to go and read President Akufo-Addo's maiden State Orientation Address sometime in March 2017, and see how he spoke ill about the previous administration because we had left a debt of 120 billion Ghana cedis. Today, our debt is in excess of 600 billion Ghana cedis, if you account for SOE debts and SPV debts, like Dachin, Esla, Sino Hydro, and the likes. It is because of this that we have had to go through this very, very painful measure. And it is not as though when they were getting here, they were not warned. They told us that they had capacity to manage the economy. Indeed, they were even hiding some of our debts at a time when red flags were appearing that we are nearing a danger zone. Even when we had some time right after the elections in 2020 to take some quick action to avert this catastrophe, they allowed amateurish politicking, and I'm being blunt today because the suffering that you and others are going through requires bluntness at this stage. They were amateurish in their politicking. Look, by the first quarter of 2021, it was obvious that we had to go to the IMF. The minority warned them. Civil society organizations warned them. Academics like Professor Bawku and co. warned them. But they refused. And the reason why they refused was just so that you and I could not ever say that an Akufo-Addo government went to the IMF, because there was no logical, economic, or financial reason to do that. So they went to the IMF so late that the only way that the IMF could touch us with a long pole was to have our debt reduced. And we are talking of some 300 billion Ghana cedis that has to be chalked off our debt, because they have to get to a debt GDP ratio of 55%. And no country in recent years has had to do such a drastic debt reduction. Sri Lanka, which has become the reference point for a basket case in terms of economic management, did 28% debt reduction. But we are having to do 45%, and which runs into about 300 billion Ghana cedis if you look at our entire debt profile. At the same time, this government is not showing any intent that, one, they will take responsibility. they continue to blame factors that are not responsible for this situation. In addition to this, the president has even refused to heed calls to downsize government. Look, I have here the document that they sent to Parliament last year that details the number of staff, not staffers, at the presidency. They have a total of 337 political appointees. Samson, what do we need 337 political appointees in addition to over 680 public and civil servants at the presidency for? And most of these people don't have any functional necessity. They have such bizarre positions as the overseer of the National Cathedral. There's somebody they call a policy associate. And they have all manner of party activists who they describe as technical advisors who do nothing beyond sitting on social media and abusing people who criticize government. And it's not as though President Akufo-Addo is oblivious of the fact that this is adding cost to the running of government. He knows it. Why, at a point, he decided that he needed 125 ministers. That is reckless mismanagement of the public purse. And when you do that, you will fall into this trap. But one would have thought that even if he was obstinate 4 years, 5 years ago, in the heart of a massive crisis like this, he would take steps that show that he empathizes with the suffering that you and other bondholders are going through. He stopped flying private jets. But he should not have even flown those private jets. In all, it cost us about 36 million Ghana cedis for him to fly those private jets. Where we are. Listen, it is far too little. Far too little. He should not have done it. Why? He stood on a public platform and told us that his biggest priority as a president was the construction of a $450 million cathedral. As I speak to you, there are over 800,000 Ghanaian school children who do not have access to desks to sit on. For 4 years running, this government has not printed one textbook that reflects the new curricula that they themselves introduced. Only last week, school feeding caterers were on their necks demanding payments. They owe contractors over 10 billion Ghana cedis that they are unable to pay. Yet, this government believes that it must keep up to 337 political appointees at the presidency and build a cathedral. They spent 400 million Ghana cedis building or digging the most expensive hole in the history of the world. And as I speak to you, look at the amorphous organizations they've created. Only recently, I saw that they had created something they call a Ghana Petroleum Hub Development Authority. We want to, buy ambulances for the Ministry of Health and dig boreholes and build classroom blocks. So we create a Special Development Initiative Secretariat. The Ministry of Trade has been supervising the establishment of factories since God knows when. But this government believes that we need a one district, one factory to do that. These assemblies have been building classroom blocks, boreholes, KVIPs, and what have you. But they must create 3 or 4 development authorities with a raft of CEOs and deputy CEOs just to whittle away public funds to satisfy public activists. They are showing absolutely no commitment to doing this. Indeed, they should have done these things even before they came to you and other bondholders to agree to forfeit the interest that was due you, that you had planned your lives around. So they are showing no responsibility. They are demonstrating no empathy. They do not think that the people of Ghana even deserve an apology for the terrible mismanagement. Indeed, I say distraction of the Ghanaian economy.
Justice Sufakfu, sort of emphasized this point on the first day of joining the picketing. The point is that we believe that we must be moving on.
Yes, but Samson, you see, we cannot move on. And you see, you and other bondholders, about 1.3 million or so of you, cannot move on at a time when the government is not moving on. If the president does not recognize that, first of all, he must punish those who brought you here. He does not recognize that he must match the sacrifice that you are making with credible,
the reason I was bringing in this was that
expenditure cuts. You cannot move on.
The minority of your party in parliament are now insisting that there must be approvals in parliament.
Yes.
And we know that the IMF board, they have their spring meeting, is it? And the thing is to hurry, be able to catch them in good time. Otherwise, we worsen our situation.
The process cannot be short-circuited. You see, the reason why that scrutiny is important is that you and other bondholders must be protected. The Ghanaian economy must be protected from the recklessness, impunity, and sometimes lawlessness of this government. Even as they got into this crisis, what have we witnessed? That the Bank of Ghana flagrantly violated Section 36 of the Bank of Ghana Act and has given this government up to 45 billion Ghana cedis illegally without recourse to Parliament. So if Parliament does not ensure that their oversight responsibility is undertaken, if they don't carry out scrutiny, more economic
we are
crimes will be
not, we
committed
are not
against
in
us.
normal times. As
No,
Bryce Simon shows us for a second time.
Samson, I do not agree.
Bryce Simon shows us for a second time. Ghana has spent 2.2 months doing this. Elsewhere, they have done up to about 33 months, 17 months in getting people around this. But we don't have the time.
For people who even
the minister has indicated to us, and all the economists have suggested,
they had all the
of course, not all the economists, because some disagree, that this economy will collapse if we don't get the IMF
First of all, they had all the time
approval.
They had all the time to take the steps that needed to be taken to avert this. Number two, for a government that even in normal times likes to act with lawlessness and impunity, the last thing you want to do is to give them a carte blanche citing crisis. Even in times of crisis, there is a need for scrutiny so that people do not do things that come to harm us further down the line. So I don't think that taking relevant documents, appropriate legislation and bills and programs to Parliament for scrutiny over a number of days is going to crash this economy. They have already crashed the economy with their recklessness and mismanagement. And we should not give a further stamp of approval to more recklessness by turning the blind. So I do not buy the time argument.
Let me bring back Bright. And Bright, Dr. Richmond Akwesi Echuahene, has a paper where he uses the 9 billion for the pension funds, and he's also using the same source. I just checked with him, and he confirms to me. He says, please, from the CSD, the pension fund was 9 billion, not 30 billion. Is CSD misinforming and misreporting? Bryce Simmons is correct with the 9 billion for pension funds. There is no record of the 30 billion in the CSD website. So what do you think is happening, Bright?
Yes, I think it's very confusing, but two very important points. One is that all along, there's been public analysis, there's been pension reports, there's been a lot of back and forth around the breakdown and composition of Ghana's debt. And everybody had assumed that the pension funds hold less than 7% of bonds. The assets under management up to 2021, which is I think the last date, the last data of which I'm aware, was about around 30-something billion. So it would be surprising that they are holding of bonds, because they have to invest in a diversified base, and a lot of it has to be government security, but they will split between the treasury bills, which have higher yield, etc. But the key point is this. While there's now a dispute about whether we can trust the central depository, which is where all the information is, versus the government's data, and I completely concede that this is baffling, because everybody in the world have been using this number, that the pension bonds hold this amount. But I understand that there's now a dispute, so we'll put that aside. Whatever be the case, when the government went out to restructure its debt, it should have known. I think you cannot dispute that, right? It should have known what the distribution of debt is, and which is eligible and which is not eligible. The argument is that as late as 7th February, the prospectus that the government issued to investors, inviting them to tender, listed all the bonds that were eligible, 67 or so bonds that were eligible, and the total amount outstanding in each of those bonds that they want investors to bring in so they can give them new debt. On that 7th of February, that prospectus I showed you said 130 billion. You cannot then, at the end of the exercise, claim that that debt was not eligible. So, because it concludes only in one of two ways. Either the government is so sloppy that it doesn't know the eligible debt going into the process, even at the end of it, or the claim that we've made that the eligible debt to 130 billion is valid. I don't see how you wrinkle out of it. If they have made the change on 7th February, when they made the last amended prospectus, I will have understood and I will have backed down. But where it's the case that on 7th of February, when you were issuing the last amended or revised prospectus, you had 130 billion as the eligible debt. We must calculate the participation rate based on that eligible debt. And if we do, we can come to no other conclusion that it's around 64%. But that is not the most critical point. The most critical point is that it then suggests that the amount of debt you were able to restructure is low, which means, therefore, that the amount of debt relief you will get, which we estimate to be in the region of about 12 billion cedis thereabout, is also low. So the government must now tell us where it will get the remaining amount of money, because we know it's about 52 billion cedis in terms of how much interest it has to service. If you've got only 12 billion from here, where do you get the rest? And I think that you can only come to two conclusions. We are far from done in terms of this attempt to get to debt sustainability.
Oh, really?
And then I agree with the opposition leader in your studio that we should not create the impression that this is some kind of major breakthrough. It's not. The big challenge is still ahead of us, and we are going to see more of these kind of restructuring attempts in order to be able to get to a range within which we are not spending 60% of our revenues on debt.
Right.
They will have to cut significant expenditures quickly, else we are not going anywhere fast.
Okay. Professor Bawku, you were saying that for the external debt restructuring process, they will demand and will receive sufficient enough information, and they will probe the assumptions. Is that to suggest that what has been done locally, you don't trust the assumptions?
No, the government took us for granted and we allowed it. So we didn't negotiate from position of strength. Okay. So we couldn't push government to get sufficient information. Government kept so much to its chest. And you see it showing up here. Okay. And that is why I said that when the figure of 9 billion was mentioned, I kept quiet because I had seen that figure. I had worked with that figure. But trying to recalculate and getting to a certain point, I had to go behind and find out other things, what happened, including the swap arrangement and all of that. Okay. So as I said, I'm hoping if it turns out to be this and we adjust, because of course we know in part, we prophesy in part. Okay?
So we are far from done.
No, we are not. Look, and I agree with Bright, and I will say that there is no way Ghana can achieve the debt sustainability cutoff of 55% in present value terms by 2028. It's impossible. We cannot. Let's not deceive ourselves. And I think that, and here, I will not put the blame solely on government. I think the IMF itself ought to contextualize their framework that by 2028, that will be too difficult for us, especially given the approach and the strategy government has adopted.
Professor Bawku, I know that you belong to the Christian Advocate Group. Nothing is impossible in the sight of God, right?
Not when we have these leaders in place.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so,
right.
And I think that
we have to rejoice.
This whole thing is to generate some level of confidence, but we are missing it out. If you look at the technical committee that was put together at the ministry when the individual bondholders started pushing, and you look at the quantification of the fiscal savings, both revenue and expenditure, we're looking at something in excess of 80 billion. So you see, there's greater room to reach debt sustainability faster through fiscal adjustment, heavily based on expenditure cuts, and that will not affect growth.
Okay.
At the end, we should be looking at the end picture. What do we want to achieve? We want to do all of this so that we can return to inclusive growth. But the approach government has adopted would not lead to that. Because, for instance, if you look at the liquidity losses to the banks alone, it's more than 6 billion. That would affect the credit lending to the private sector. If you look at the haircut on households, private sector and all of that. But if we cut this expenditure, they will not affect growth. They will rather free up space for growth-enhancing spending. And Samson, as we are talking about this, inflation came down marginally, January, 51.6%. Remember, inflation in Cote d'Ivoire is less than 5%. Of course, they have just 32 ministers. You count the number of ministers we have in Ghana. So it tells you that, and look, there is some...
But Prof, that argument with the number of ministers, well, there are people who have said that the optics is also important to show that you appreciate, as in if you reduce the numbers of ministers, it is also important that it will show the public that you appreciate what is going on. But we are told that what you get it's not any substantial. If you do...
It's not just the ministers. You are looking at overall government size agencies. Look, if you look at from 2017, multiple agencies that have been created, some actually have no value to be in existence.
Okay.
But they are sustained, budgetary allocation and all of that. So if you put all these things together, there's practically no space. And if we are not careful, we'll finish this debt restructuring. In less than 2 years, we'll come back to the table again.
John, are you at government with the impression that this is done and dusted?
Well, this is an ongoing process. We want to thank Ghanaians for the support on the successful completion of the domestic debt exchange program. I will encourage Bright to confirm the 30 billion figure of the pension funds, just for him to be sure. And we also want to assure Ghanaians that all the concerns that have been raised in terms of fiscal adjustment that have to be done in response to the current circumstances, government has its eyes on it, and at the right time, the necessary announcement to be made. I know my brother Felix in the studio is ranting and trying to do politics and take advantage of the difficult situation. Unfortunately, where we stand now, it is not time to do a blame game.
Oh, so, but he's speaking about matters that ordinary people are talking about.
I know,
did you hear Justice Ofer Kufu?
For years.
The expectation of what you should do, cut down. You admitted that a while ago.
I've responded to that those are the fiscal adjustment requests which will be responded to. But he should remember that in the absence of COVID, he left Ghana with Dumso. He could not even solve Dumso in 5 years in his incompetence. The kind of incompetent government that they led us.
That's another argument that I have taken, MVP communicators through this on this show. At a later date, we can debate that. But the records will show that the NDC had dealt with Dumso before you took over.
Absolutely.
They couldn't. The record will show that they couldn't deal with
it. If they had inherited Dumso, given their hopelessness and incompetence, we'll still be in darkness. We don't have capacity to solve any problem.
All right.
In the short time, but you see, today is not a good day to engage in such engagement.
Of course,
that's right.
And so let me just take opportunity to thank all those who sacrificed and agreed to be part of this process, and to assure them that government is sensitive to the issues, and we are going to respond at the right time on the necessary fiscal adjustments as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Samson,
you.
A very quick point to say that even if the pension bonds as funds were taken out, that is still non-participation. So you still have to adjust your participation rate to reflect the outcome. The fact that they didn't take part is non-participation.
Yes.
So if you intended initially for them to take part, they didn't take part, you still cannot use that to get a higher participation rate.
All right.
It's not mathematically possible.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have had Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa. Godfred A. Bokping is Professor of Finance and Economist, University of Ghana. Dr. John Ampuntia Kuma is MP Ejusu and Deputy Minister of Finance. And Felix Kwachiofosu is former Deputy Communications Minister and NDC parliamentary candidate for Ebura Asebu Kwaman Kese. And my outfit, as always, is by Habil Scooter. You can find them at Ajiringano Gates. You could also call 0200 84 1988. 0200 84 1988. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a good afternoon, God willing. Next week, we bring you another commanding edition of the Newsfile.